Good morning. Happy Monday. Jupiter here. It is currently, well, it was just raining really hard, which I enjoy, so I had the window open, but it kind of stopped. But we'll see what happens. We are going to be reading chapters 11 and 12 today. And we left off where all the Emberites are getting very hungry. They are getting worried that the people of Sparks don't really want to help them anymore. There's just not enough food for everyone to go around. The people of Sparks are... everyone's getting a lot of tension is being built up right now. So chapter 11 is called Tick's Projects. By the month of burning, it was so hot that the people of Ember felt as if they were trapped in a huge oven. The sun blazed down, the grasses dried to a brownish yellow, the roads were deep in dust. People gasped and sneezed and wilted. All they wanted was to lie down in the shade or wade deep into the cool water of the river. But the work went on as always. In the ferocious heat, they hauled garbage, cleaned out the goat pens, pulled weeds in the field, shoveled manure. When they flopped down on the ground to rest or stopped every few minutes for a drink of water, the workers of Sparks glared at them and started grumbling. They suspected them of being lazy, and that made the people of Ember angry. Resentment increased on both sides until any little accident would flare into a big fight. At the Pioneer Hotel, the mood grew more and more grim. At first, it had been rather fun to live there, especially for the smaller children, who explored the hidden corners of the huge old buildings, held races in the long corridors, and played colossal games of hide and seek. Lizzie Biscoe liked going into the ladies' room on the ground floor, where there was still a large fragment of mirror attached to the wall. She could see almost her entire self in it, which pleased her on the days when she had just washed her hair in the river or found a bit of colored cloth to use as a ribbon. But for the older people, the Pioneer Hotel quickly stopped feeling like a fine adventure. They didn't like sleeping on piles of pine needles and dry grasses wrapped in bedspreads. It annoyed them to have to go to the river for water, and to have no indoor bathrooms, only outhouses full of bad smells and spiders. They worried that the candles might set things on fire, and they wanted real windows with glass to keep the bugs out. Almost 2 months had passed since they had arrived in Sparks. In about 4 months, they would have to leave. If they didn't like living in the hotel, they knew they'd like even less to start from nothing somewhere out in the wilderness. They imagined sleeping with no roof over their heads, having no protection at all from the sun or the bugs, and scratching through the grass for something to eat. No one liked the prospect. In the dim hallways in the roofless, ruined lobby and in the dusty ballroom, people gathered in little clusters and spoke to each other in worried tones, and sometimes their worry turned to anger and fear. One person, however, did not stand around talking, and that was Tick Hassler. When he saw a problem, he did something about it. He became a sort of leader around the Pioneer Hotel, just by the force of his personality. He started what he called the Pioneer Hotel Rehabilitation Project. He explained his ideas to anyone who would listen, and the way he explained them made them seem instantly exciting and fun. "Here's what we're gonna do," he would say, the night he announced the very first project. It was late evening of a very hot day, nearly dark, and a few people were still sitting out on the steps of the hotel, hoping for a cool breeze. Tick never seemed much affected by the heat. Everyone else was disheveled and sweaty by the end of the day, but Tick always managed to look neat, his hair combed so flat it looked almost polished, his bare arms and legs smooth and brown, his clothes, a plain black t-shirt and black shorts, never torn or stained. He wore his sunglasses almost all the time, and they gave him a commanding and slightly mysterious look. Dune was there the night Tick announced his first project. It was a relief, after a hard day, to be part of a group of people who were easy with each other and a group with a common purpose. Several of Dune's classmates from the Ember School were part of it, and some boys who had been cart pullers with Tick, and quite a few others. There were some girls, too. Lizzie was always somewhere around Tick, listening eagerly as he talked or trotting off on an errand of some sort. She had stopped wearing the black scarf that signified her mourning for Looper. "I've been sad long enough," she told Dune. "Beside, Tick doesn't think black looks good on me." Now she wore her sunglasses all the time. "What we're gonna do," said Tick, sitting on the low wall that bordered the steps, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees and speaking in a way that made you feel his words were meant just for you. We're going to get ourselves organized. There's a lot that needs to be done around here. People were nodding. The first thing we need is a gathering place, like the gathering hall back in Ember. And what's the perfect spot for it? He held out his hands, palms facing the sky, waiting for an answer. No one spoke. This field, of course. He swept an arm out, taking in the whole of the big field in front of the hotel, with its rough, weedy ground, scrawny trees, and chunks of concrete and other rubble. We're going to clear it out. We're going to make it into a grand plaza, better than the one they have in the village. We can have meetings here with a leader speaking to us from these steps. We don't have a leader, someone called. But we will someday, once we decide who's best for the job, Tick said. I'm going to start on it tomorrow. Who wants to work on it with me? And although they had already worked a full day, nearly all of them flung their hands up and volunteered. Dune did too. It wasn't so much that he wanted to clear the field and make a plaza. He wasn't sure they really needed such a thing. After all, they'd be leaving here before long. But he wanted to be a part of it. He didn't want to be left out. The project got off to a great start. 20 or 30 people were out there every night, pulling up weeds, digging out rubble, and hacking down trees. Tick was always there, working twice as fast and hard as anyone else, and telling them all what a terrific progress they were making. It was hard work, but somehow it was fun too. Then one night, Tick called everyone together and announced he had a new idea. We won't stop working on the field, he said, but I'm going to take a team out to start on another project. We need to build a platform out over the river. It'll get us out toward the deeper part where we can fish and swim and maybe even launch a boat someday. There might be a lot of places to explore beside this one. Who wants to work on that with me? Of course, everyone wanted to switch over to this new project. It sounded much more interesting than clearing the field. And besides, people wanted to be on the project Tick was working on. So a great many of them started helping with the new platform, the dock, Tick said it was called. They ripped boards off the old storage sheds behind the hotel. They piled up rocks on the river to make supports. The field project slowed way down. Hardly anyone was working on it anymore. And as the weeks went on, Dune began to see that this was how Tick's projects went. He would have an idea and get everyone excited about it. They would start to work. Then after a while, Tick would have an idea for a new project, and everyone would follow him to that one, while the old project withered away. What Tick seemed to like was the thrill of something new, and the power of being a leader. This slightly dimmed Dune's admiration for Tick, but no one was perfect after all. Tick had far more energy than most people, and far more ideas, even though they weren't all good ones. In addition to helping with Tick's projects, Dune had plenty of his own projects to keep him busy. In the early mornings, he helped Clary with the garden she had put near the river. He was working on a way to make water easier to get for her. He seen a pump the villagers had constructed, which used the river's current to push water out into the channels that water the fields. This pump was fairly simple, a deep hole in the riverbank with an arrangement of pipes and valves at the bottom. He thought he could figure out how to make one. In the evenings, by the last of the daylight, Dune read. He was choosing books from the room in back of the Ark every few days now. His choices at first were pretty random. He would just grab whatever he could reach. But then he had a great idea for bringing some sort of collection. One day, when he got back to room 215 after work, he found Edward Pocket standing by the window, frowning at the sky. Edward looked unhappy. His gnarled hands were tightened into fists, and his mouth was bunched up into a twisted knot. "Are you all right?" said Dune. "Oh, I'm fine," said Edward. "I just love sitting here, doing nothing, all day." "You're bored," said Dune. "Yes," Edward cried. "Yes, yes, yes." He raised both hands and grabbed wads of his frizzled gray hair and stretched his mouth into a mad grin. "They say I'm too old to work, but I'm not ready to freeze up and die. I don't want to spend my days chatting or sleeping. What am I supposed to do with myself?" And of course, Dune had the answer. It was so obvious he didn't know why he hadn't thought of it before. "I know exactly what you could do," he said, and he told Edward Pocket about all the books. Now Edward spent all the daylight hours in the book room sorting and organizing and arranging the books. He often picked out ones he thought Dune would like and brought them back to the hotel. In this way, Dune learned about bird migrations, cowboys, basketball, whales, mountain climbing, Egyptian history, dog training, French cooking, car repair, and dinosaurs, among other things. Edward even found a book called Science Projects, in which there was a chapter that explained how to do an experiment that would make electricity. The experiment required things Dune didn't have, but he kept the book anyway in case he ever got him. You never knew what was going to turn up in the loads the roamers bring back to town. In the meantime, Tick carried on tirelessly with his projects. The dock never got built. He kept getting torn apart by the river's current. But other projects did succeed. One of Tick's ideas was to hoist the flag of Ember over the Pioneer Hotel. Lottie Hoover, who had worked in one of Ember's city offices, had rolled the flag up and tucked it into her bag just before she rushed down into the pipeworks to leave. Dude didn't really see the point of flying Ember's flag over the hotel. Everyone knew that it was where the people of Ember lived. But he helped with the project, sawing the limbs off a tall, thin tree to make a flagpole. Soon the flag of the city of Ember, deep blue with a yellow grid, flapped over the Pioneer. Beautiful, said Tick, gazing up at it. He turned to the people gathered around him. We have to show them, he said, that we're proud of being the people of Ember. They have all the advantages right now. They control the food. They control the work teams. They're taller than we are and stronger. But we can't let any of that matter. If we want them to respect us, we have to respect ourselves. Several days later, as Dune was walking through the plaza, he noticed that a flag was also flying from the tower of the town hall. It was black with a spray of orange dots rising around the corner. Sparks, Dune thought. He wondered if they had had this flag all along, or if someone had made it and put it up after seeing the one at the Pioneer Hotel. Chapter 12. Casper arrives with a surprise. Lena was sweeping the floor of the kitchen when she heard the thump and shuffle of hooves outside. There was a shout in a man's voice. Hello, where is everybody? And then a shriek from inside the house, running footsteps, and Torrin's voice screaming, Casper, Casper, you're home! Lena flung down the broom and dashed to the door. There was Torrin, clamped onto the front of a very large man who was rumpling Torrin's hair and thumping him on the back. Behind the man was his truck, an especially large one, piled high with boxes and crates, pulled behind two huge oxen with curved horns. They stood breathing noisily, their sides going in and out. Well, small brother, said Casper, glad to see me? Yes, said Torrin. He had wrapped his arms from around his brother's waist and gazed up at his face. You were gone so long this time. I had to extend my route. Quite far, in fact, quite far. The work of a roamer gets harder every year, said Casper. Lena could see Casper's resemblance to his brother Torrin. They both had the same small eyes and the same wispy light brown hair. But while Torrin was narrow, Casper was wide. He had a wide, round, rosy pink face with a glistening round chin. It was almost a babyish-looking face, except for the tiny mustache on the upper lip, twisted at both ends into points. Dr. Hester, who had been picking peas, came out from the side of the house. Welcome back, traveler, she said. Auntie Hester, cried Casper, flinging his arms wide. He stood that way while Dr. Hester walked toward him, and when she came close, he gave her a hug that lifted her feet and their dusty slippers off the ground. Don't do that, she said, her face squashed against Casper's shoulder. He dropped her back down. Can't help it. You're light as a feather. I am not. You're just showing off your muscles, said the doctor. Well, said Casper, it's true that being a roamer builds muscles. He made a fist and flexed his meaty arm back and forth. Heavy things to lift, you know. Some exceedingly heavy. Out near the Camp Range foothills a few months ago, I got stuck in the mud and had to lift the whole back end of the truck, which was loaded up at the time with... Torrin jumped up and down at Casper's side. Did you bring me a surprise? Casper looked startled. A surprise? Yeah, the way you always do. A surprise for me. For a second, Lena felt sorry for Torrin. The look on his face was so hopeful. She had a feeling that Casper was more important to Torrin than Torrin was to Casper. Casper laughed. He had the oddest laugh. All on one high squeaky note. It was hardly a sound of pleasure at all. Well, he said, as it happens, I did bring one surprise. It's more of a surprise for everyone, though. He looked back towards his truck. Are you there? He called. Right here, answered a gruff voice. From behind the truck stepped a woman almost as big as Casper himself, a massive tree trunk of a woman, with swirls and tangles of red-brown hair falling to her shoulders. She was dressed in faded blue pants and a huge brown shirt. She looked at them, smiling slightly. Her eyes were blue and fierce. "This is Maddie. She's my Roman partner," said Caspar. From Torin, there was silence. Dr. Hester held out her hand and said, "Welcome." The big woman pumped the doctor's hand firmly up and down 3 times, and then Dr. Hester glanced toward the house and saw Lena standing in the doorway. "Caspar," she said, turning back to him, "have you heard about what's happened since you've been gone? About the people who came here from the underground city?" "I heard something about it," said Caspar. "Lena is one of them," Dr. Hester said. "Come here, Lena." Lena walked out toward Caspar, who squinted at her and then thrust a hand into the pocket of his pants and pulled out a pair of slightly bent glasses, which he put on. He peered at her through the cracked lenses as she approached. When she got close, he held out an enormous hand. Lena shook it. "Underground, huh?" said Caspar. The cloudy glasses made his eyes look bigger and dimmer. "Some sort of mole people? But you've got no fur." He laughed that squeaky laugh again. Lena smiled politely at his stupid joke. Something about Caspar seemed to be slightly off, she thought. "Lena's sister Poppy is with us as well, and their guardian, Mrs. Murdo," Dr. Hester went on. During all this, Torin had been standing very still. His narrow face had closed down, his eyes looked like tiny stones, and his mouth was pinched small. He was staring at Maddie. Suddenly he cried, "But I'm supposed to be your partner." Caspar blinked at him as if he had already forgotten he was there. "You? You're much too small." "I'm almost 11," Torin yelled. "I'm big enough." "Not quite, little brother," Caspar said. He grinned at Maddie, who gazed back at him calmly. She was like a big rock. Her face didn't even move. Torin scowled. "Don't call me little," he shouted. He turned and ran toward the house. Caspar watched him go, lifting his eyebrows slightly. "It's hard for children to accept change, but they must learn, mustn't they?" Dr. Hester said. "Our 3 guests have been sleeping in the loft, Caspar. They'll have to sleep in the main room while you're here." She paused. "How long do you think you'll stay?" "Just a night or 2, said Caspar. His face had a serious look. "I'm on a particular mission this time, headed for the city." "The city?" thought Lena. "What city?" The doctor echoed her thought. "The city? Why in the world would you go there?" She seemed astonished, as if she had never heard before of anyone going to the city. "Because of this particular mission," Caspar said. "Of a secret nature." "Ah, I see," said Dr. Hester. "All right, then. It's nearly time to eat. Take your beast down to the barn and then come on in." That night, Caspar talked a great deal about his exploits as a roamer. "In the northern forest lands," he said, "I came upon some old cabins that still had glass in the windows. It was quite a trick to get the glass out without breaking it. It took 4 days, but I managed. Did cut my hand up a bit." He extended his large hand and pointed at a tiny scar on the palm. "Quite a lot of blood from that one. Then up near Hogmarsh, I found a very valuable item." He gazed around at them, smiling slightly. "What was it?" asked Torin, who had forgotten for a moment he was mad at his big brother. "An ancient statue," said Caspar. "It depicts some very rare sort of bird with a long neck and only 1 leg. You can see that it was once painted pink." He paused to let the wonder of this sink in. "Pink, tink, stink," said Poppy. "Pinky stinky." She stared at Caspar and giggled. "Hush, Poppy," said Lena. "Then in Ardenwood," Caspar went on, idly twisting his tiny mustache, "I had to fend off a few bandits." "Bandits?" cried Torin. "Really?" "Well, they might well have been bandits," Caspar said. "Turned out they had no weapons, but they were set on stealing from me, that's for sure. I got rid of them fast with a few well-placed lashes." Caspar sliced his arm through the air as if he were cracking a whip. "And a good thing, too, because not far from there I located another special thing. Several boxes of authentic, pre-disaster artificial flowers. They are made of very fine cloth, hardly faded at all." "Artificial flowers?" said Lena, wondering why the people of Sparks would want fake flowers when they had real ones growing everywhere. "Yes," said Caspar. "I have a sort of knack for finding unusual things." Maddie didn't join much in the conversation. Once Mrs. Murdo, being polite, asked her if she too enjoyed being a roamer, she only smiled a little and said, I don't mind it. There are worse things to be. Mrs. Murdo waited to hear what the worst things were, but it seemed that was all she was going to say. When it was bedtime, Caspar went up into the loft and Torin dashed up after him. Maddie took Torin's place in the medicine room, saying a brief good night and closing the door firmly after her. The doctor helped Lena and Mrs. Murdo make up beds of pads and blankets on the couch and on the floor. Sounds interesting to be a roamer, Lena said. I suppose so, said the doctor. And Caspar has a special knack for finding things? The doctor bent over and spoke softly into Lena's ear. He has a knack for finding the wrong things. He's always bringing loads of things people already have and not finding things people really need. Artificial flowers? What are we going to do with artificial flowers? The bed being made up, she went around the room and blew out all the candles but one. He's always been a bit odd. Look as if he's gotten even odder since he was here last. He tries hard, though. You can say that for him. He has high ambitions. He wants to be a famous roamer. He doesn't know that he's a bit famous already, but not famous in the way he would like. She handed the last candle to Lena and stumped off to her room. The next day was strange and unpleasant. Caspar sat in the big armchair telling stories about all of his adventures, while Torin hovered around him asking questions. Lena listened for a while. She was curious about this work of roaming. It did sound exciting, like something she might want to do herself. But she soon got bored because it seemed to her that Caspar never said much about the really interesting parts of his adventures. She wanted to hear about the faraway places and how the old buildings looked and everything that was in the buildings. But all Caspar talked about was how brave and clever he had been to find the things he did and what injuries he had suffered because he found them. Maddie didn't listen to Caspar. She spent most of her time in the courtyard or in the garden, motionless and silent, gazing at the plants, her arms folded across her wide waist. Every now and then she plucked a leaf or blossom, rubbed it between her fingers, and sniffed it. Once she asked Lena what a certain plant was. I'm not sure, Lena said. I only know a few of them. Then you know more than I do, said Maddie, flashing Lena an unexpected smile. But other than that, she said almost nothing to anyone. She didn't seem angry or unhappy, just off in her own world. Lena wondered about her, but felt far too shy to ask her any questions. After a while, Caspar shooed Torin away, sat down at the table, and pulled some scraps of paper from his pocket. He spread them out and bent over them, and his jovial, boastful manner changed. He ran his finger along the lines of writing on the papers. He wrote on them with a stubby pencil. And he did so. He frowned and muttered and mumbled to himself words that sounded like nonsense to Lena, except for an occasional string of numbers. 3578, he would say. Trouble Wago 44209. She wandered up behind him and tried to look over his shoulder. After all, she had experience with torn documents and hard to decipher bits of writing. But Caspar twisted around and scowled at her, holding his hand over her papers. Private, private, get away, he said. He didn't let Torin see either, so Torin sat on the window and sulked. Around mid-afternoon, the doctor rushed in the door looking even more frazzled than usual. Her shirt was smudged with blood, and her shirt tails were half tucked in and half not. I'm out of clean bandages, she said. Lena, did you do them? I need some, and I need that lavender extract, a bottle of it. No, I better get 2 bottles. She hurried into the medicine room. Lena had forgotten all about the bandages. She dashed into the kitchen, pulled some rags from the basket, and tore them into strips. She took these to the doctor, who was on her knees, rummaging through the chest. And, said the doctor, I'm going to have to make some mustard plasters tonight. You'll need to go out into the orchard and gather me some mustard flowers. I need a lot. Get the leaves, too, and the roots. I want the whole plant. She found her bottles of oil, thrust her bag along with the bandages, and rushed out the door. Lena felt her spirits sink down into her shoes. She didn't want to gather mustard plants. It was too hot. It was ferociously hot. She was sick of being hot, having her neck damp beneath her long hair and her clothes sticking to her back. She was sick of doing chores. She shuffled out into the courtyard where a few of the doctor's seedlings were drying up in their pots. She trudged to the pump, filled a bucket, and splashed some water on each limp plant. Then she sat down in the shade of the grapevine and leaned against the wall beneath the window and thought about everything that was wrong. She was mad at the doctor for giving her so much work to do and hardly noticing when she did do it. She was mad at Mrs. Murdo for not moving them out to the Pioneer Hotel, and she was lonely. She missed being with people she knew. Especially, she missed being with Dune in the old way. the way they had been together when they were partners in Ember. Now he seemed to care more about his new friends than he did for her. Even though she thought about him, she felt a thud of pain, like a bruise was placed inside her. From the window just above her head, Lena heard Casper's voice. Not now. I have to do some planning. I need. The door opened and Torrance stormed out. He threw a furious glance at Lena but didn't speak. He ran through the gate and up the road. He's mad too, thought Lena. Everyone's mad. From inside, she heard Casper's voice again, startlingly near. He was talking to Maddie, who must have come to the kitchen door. Lena realized they were standing by the window just behind her. We'll head out day after tomorrow, starting early, said Casper. Uh-huh, said Maddie in her low, growly voice. All those stories about germs still lurking there? They're nonsense, you know. Those germs died a long time ago. No doubt you're right, said Maddie. They were talking about the city. Lena sat very still and listened harder. People talk about all other kinds of dangers there, too. Bandits and so on. Doesn't bother me, said Casper. Of course not, Maddie said. And anyway, even if there is danger, it's worth the risk because of what we're going to find. You sound very sure that we're going to find it, said Maddie. Of course I am, said Casper. Aren't you? The answer to this was just a grunt. They moved away from the window, and their voices grew fainter. Maddie spoke next. Lena couldn't hear all of what she said, but she caught the words, how far, and in Casper's answer she heard the words, day's journey. Then she heard steps clomping up the stairs to the loft, and the room went quiet. Lena sat very still. Her bad mood faded. Other thoughts swirled in her mind. She was remembering the sparkling city whose picture she had drawn so many times, that great city of light, the city she had always believed in. Now Casper was planning to go there. It wasn't dangerous anymore, and it was only a day's journey away. She knew, of course, that the city Casper was talking about had been damaged, like everything else in the disaster. The beautiful, shining city she had imagined must have been this city in the past, in the time before the disaster. In her mind, she revised her vision of the city. Some of the high towers would have toppled, and their windows would be broken. Stones from ruined buildings would have fallen into the street. Roofs would be caved in. But the idea that struck her was this. Maybe the people of Ember were meant to restore the city. Perhaps their great job, the reason they had come up into this new world, was to live in the city and rebuild it, so that once again it was a glorious, shining city of Lena's vision. This was such a beautiful idea. That night, she lay in bed thinking about it, and the more she thought, the more sure she was, and the more excited. Wow, lots of stuff. So we finally get to meet Casper, and he has a friend with him, and they're talking about this new city. And we're hearing about all these projects that Tick is starting to do, and they're starting to realize that as a city of Ember, they need to come together. So as always, I'd love it if you guys reached out to me or Mrs. Espinal Johnson and let us know about how you're. And the next chapter is called Taking Action. So I hope everyone has a great Monday. I miss you all like crazy, and just let me know what you guys are up to and all the books you're reading. Hopefully you guys got some sunshine this weekend, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.